Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Camp Hacker. This podcast is dedicated to what many camp professionals believe to be the most important time at camp, no matter what you call it, staff training, orientation, or leadership training. This critical time period prepares your staff to fulfill all the promises that you make to parents and customers throughout the rest of the year. My name is Ruby Compton. I'm the Summer Camp Program Director at Green River Preserve in Western North Carolina. We are a summer camp that's focused on connecting children with nature, and we're located on a 3,400-acre private wildlife preserve. Before we get going any further, I want to introduce our other hosts. So Gab, why don't you kick it off for us?
My name's Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Oro. Camp Oro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on a linguistic program, French and English.
And I'm Beth Allison. I am a camp consultant talking to you from Woodstock, Ontario, Canada. I was a camp director and an executive director for 15 years with my husband, Travis Allison, and we currently run Camp Hacker and our new venture, Go Camp Pro.
Cool. So today's topic is best interview practices. Beth, can you share a little bit about why we chose this topic for today?
Absolutely. We say this all the time on Camp Code, but leadership training begins with hiring. And the interview process is, for most people, the way that directors decide whether a staff member is a good fit for camp or not. And so it's really important for us that you put the effort in at the beginning, because we've said before, it's a whole lot less work than having to let someone go.
Absolutely. Cool. So all three of us have a little bit different camp experiences, and I'm sure a little bit different interview processes. So I just want to start off with each of us sharing the interview process that you use currently, or that you have found to be the most helpful, or that you just enjoyed the most. So Beth, can you start us off on that one?
Sure. I think before I start, I just have to say that it's really imperative that your interviews and your questions at your interviews do 6 things. So 2 for you and 4 from their end. So from your end, I think it's really important that your applicant knows what you value and what you think is important. And I also think from your end that it sets the groundwork for training right from that day. From their end, it gets them to really show you their true selves, not what they think you want to hear or want to see. It gives them an opportunity to shine, so offering as many different opportunities as there are personalities, so that everybody has that opportunity to show you what they've got. It helps them helps you to find out how they work with and care for children and teens, and also how they will work as part of a staff team. I think that's really important. So for us, we had a 3-pronged process. One was a written application, where we needed all their information, their quals, the positions they were interested in. They had 3 essay type questions that they needed to answer. Part 2 was a creative project, and it was different every year, but we would ask a question. For example, what can a community of camp people do for a child? And they could answer it any way they wanted to. So whether that was through video or through a book or through a physical project. One year we had a staff member build us a toolbox. So she built a wooden toolbox and every tool in it. And then every tool had written on it what it could be used for. And it was really, really interesting. It was really well done. And our third part of our process was always a hiring day. So for us, a team is not a group of people that works together, but a team is a group of people that trust each other. So we needed to start building that trust from day one. And for me, that was hiring day.
Awesome. I love that question. What can the camp community do for a child? I could already see a staff training session just being built right out of that. So very cool. Gab, tell us about yours.
Ours, basically, for a lot of our staff members don't live around camp. So some people are able to gather a lot of people together and do sort of group interviews. And I really wish that we could do that. That's actually something that I've in the past tried to figure out how we can do. But our reality is that most of the time our staff members come from quite far away. So a lot of the stuff that we do is over Skype, and and I really, really like the Skype process because you can see the staff member's face and you can see their reactions. So the first things first, that we make sure that our staff members that are being interviewed have Skype. And then the other thing is that it's very similar to Beth. If we have a creative application for our staff members, and we actually borrowed that from Beth and Travis a long time ago. And it's come to be something quite amazing as a process for our staff members, because they really are able to express themselves and find what's exciting about camp. And it really also separates those staff members that are just coming back just because that's what they've been doing year after year, and the staff members that are looking for something, more challenges, and are excited to come back to camp. They're coming back for the right reasons. A lot of people can BS on an application,
That's right.
and also a lot of people aren't really built to do well on applications. So this really allows them to succeed. And so when we have an application that's not maybe at full potential, it really opens up for a dialogue of, this is what I've noticed. It doesn't seem like you put everything into it. Let's talk about that. And right from that point, we have something to talk about. And I get to meet our staff on a different level. I didn't know that so-and-so loves sewing, or I didn't know that so-and-so was so involved in music and, wrote a song. And we had a staff member that did a whole thing in her school, and she got her whole school involved and did sort of this musical throughout the school, to show that she wanted to be staff coordinator. And she sort of said, look, I can boss people around and they don't even know it. But it was absolutely fantastic. But I didn't know she had that in her at all. And the fact that she was able to organize all of that and put it together, it was quite amazing. So one of our first things is definitely the creative application. And as well as we set up a meeting for staff members not to necessarily apply for positions, but to talk about what they like at camp and how they grow at camp. And then through those conversations, we make suggestions with them about what position might fit that. So there are staff members that are like, yes, canoeing, that's what I want to do. But for the most part, we try to get them to just think about camp and the camp experience, and through a conversation, then we look at maybe what positions they might be interested in. So that's our starting point.
Cool. I would say ours is probably less involved than both of y'all's was. So one of the tools that I really use that I adore is Doodle. I have a form email that when I read an application, we do have a written application as well. It's pretty general, pretty standard stuff. And seems like a solid applicant on paper. They'll get an invitation to tell me what times will work for them. It's really great because I get a calendar view. I'm very visual, so I can look at the calendar and go, yeah, this time, and click on it, say, okay. They immediately get a notification back that says, Ruby picked this time. And so that saved me a lot of time from my first summer when I was scheduling interviews and just so many back and forth emails and phone calls. So if you haven't used scheduling software, I highly recommend it because it makes things a lot easier. And so then we schedule an interview, and I'll talk about my questions later, but again, pretty standard fare, but we do a lot of ours through Skype as well. And I totally agree with Gab that being able to see the person and see how they react and the energy they bring to it, and even when they answer a question, are they looking into the camera or looking at you on the screen, or are they looking off into space? It's an awkward medium a lot of times, especially that first time you do it, but I think you can tell a lot by how people are interacting even with the screen.
Absolutely.
And so then after our interview, we actually put something new in this year, which is at least for our cabin staff, they have to do a writing sample, actually handwrite a letter to a camper parent. And so they get a worksheet basically they can download through our application that gives a bunch of information about a camper, and it's good and bad. So-and-so, Fred really likes his counselor. Fred was a little bit homesick. He's really nervous about camp out. He's not getting along with a camper in the cabin. He is... really loves dance and archery, and then having these applicants just, first of all, handwrite. Do you know how to handwrite a letter? Because that is a dying skill.
Yes.
And then just seeing how they express it, and how do you talk about that child, and how do you express the things that aren't so positive. And, again, we know that they're not going to be perfect because they haven't been given any coaching on this. But it's amazing, even right there, you can see a difference in maturity and formality. And some of it's just polish. Like, how polished is this person? And I think it provides an extra piece to the puzzle of, like, how teachable and trainable are these people, too. So I've really, really enjoyed that, getting to see that happen. And then we often will schedule a second interview, and I'm going into being a director, I've pretty well thought, like, within a first interview, you can pretty well know, like, yes, I definitely want to explore more with this person, or nope, I'm not interested. And, like, you have the occasional, but if you're feeling that way, I've often found that that's probably not going to be the best hire. They may prove themselves later, but it's generally the people that you're pretty enthusiastic about and feel really good about that do end up working out. There are certainly exceptions to that rule.
But we all know them.
Yeah. But, I was also talking to a director recently, and he said, we do 3 interviews because somebody can be really totally on their A game that first interview, but it's unlikely that they're going to be quite so spot on for interview 2 and 3. And they set up their interviews where, they're interviewing with a male director one time and a female director another time, and just seeing if those interactions are any different. And so that's kind of converted me to wanting to try to have at least a couple interactions with the staff with the applicant before offering them a job. So that's our basic process. Again, pretty standard fare. The other thing that I do that I really love technology-wise is I have my interview questions on a Google form. So the interview questions are set up as the form, and then I can type in notes into the boxes like somebody would fill out that form. And then I can hit submit. And then I can go back into the back end of that spreadsheet where it saves and just download their line of responses into a PDF and then upload that into, we use CampMinder, so right up into CampMinder in their notes. So that makes it really nice because if there's other people that want to see their interview notes, want to see what they said, they can go right into our database management software and see that, and it's just a real easy, quick tool. So that's something, again, if you're not using and are trying to figure out another way to kind of speed up that process or make it a little more efficient, I think that can be a good option. Great. Any other thoughts on the process?
I think we also do 3 interviews, whether they're returning staff or new staff members. And I think that to a lot of camp directors that maybe have a smaller team to do interviews, that can be a little bit daunting. It's a lot of work. I mean, people ask, what do I do all year? I'm like pretty much staff interviews. That's a lot. It's pretty much what I do. I think that one of the things is that I've trained some of my leadership team members to be able to do some of those interviews, even if they might not be returning the next year. And they shadow interviews. They do about 5 interviews with me, and we go through the process together, and then I allow them to do the second interview on their own. And it alleviates some of that time that is spent for interviews, and it gives somebody else a different perspective of camp because they're meeting somebody else. And that's been very useful. And what you're talking about, Ruby, is keeping everything online and that kind of organizational piece, I think, is really, really important. We send an email to all of the people that we've interviewed, and we cap what we talked about. So that also takes a little bit of time, but it's stopped misunderstandings where we've noticed that some of our younger staff members, even though they're present in the interview and they're engaged, they don't always hear everything that we're talking about. So we just paraphrase basically exactly what happened, and we send that email out, and also that stops with any misunderstanding. So when you have a couple of different interviewers, we put that email together, both people or 3 people look at it and say, yep, that makes sense. And then the staff member responds saying, yeah, that's exactly what we talked about.
That's cool.
Which is great. Yeah.
Nice. And I just want to add that with hiring days, because if you haven't listened to our podcasts before, for us, we would bring everybody together who was applying for either a senior staff position or a counseling position. So we ran 2 different hiring days. And if you lived more than 2 hours away, we didn't expect you to come. But if you were within a 2-hour drive, you came to your specific day. And for us, it was a chemistry test to see how well people fit together as a team. And even if you were a great staff member last year, we really needed to see how you would work as part of the team this year. And having that whole day laid out for them, so we sort of went from 10 till 4, and we even all ate lunch together, which was also very telling. And I watched everything. I watched everybody as they participated. I listened, all of those things. And in the afternoon, people were pulled out for interviews during that time period. So everybody had a chance to have a half an hour interview as well. And we would either have board members or alumni that we trusted who would run the interviews. The questions would be written by Travis and by me, and they were videotaped. So we got to watch them later, but we didn't leave the hiring day because we didn't want to miss out on what happened. And I think as we go into the podcast and talk about questions and things, I can let you know some of the things we did during a hiring day. But for us, it was always really important. And even if you were on staff for like the 10th year in a row, you still had to come to hiring day because we needed to see what the fit was like. And then that often told us where people's positions should really be targeted.
Cool. Yeah, the YMCA camp where I worked, they started doing group interviews, and their structure was similar. The thing that they told the staff to come to do, prepared to do, was to teach a skill. So teach a game, teach a song, teach somebody how to shoot a basketball, a 10-minute or less lesson, show us what that would look like, and everybody else is going to participate. And so then you see from the staff, who's game and like, yeah, cool, I'll be a kid, I'll be that really obnoxious kid, or I'll be the totally compliant but ask good questions, So I think observation is really key when you can set up something like that and let that be a role that you can take on where you just sit and watch.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, so let's keep moving. So Beth, I want to toss this question over to you first. What qualities are you looking for when you're interviewing a staff applicant? I think you hit on this some, but I'd love to hear you elaborate more on that.
Sure, and I have a feeling the three of us are all going to have the same kinds of qualities, but I was always looking for somebody who was in it for all the right reasons. So I can teach them skills or I can send them to training, but they have to have the right heart before we get started. And that was always key for me. Somebody who is willing to serve, not just to serve camp and the campers, but the whole community, and to serve this year. Not just what they were willing to do last year. And as we know, young adults, because we started hiring at 17, they changed a lot at that time in their lives. So we really had to look at this year and were they ready to do that. Somebody with a good head on their shoulders who could work really calmly in a crisis, but who could also think things through and act quickly when needed. Somebody who was creative, flexible, willing to learn. That was really key, and eager. For us, somebody who was inclusive and open-minded and who played well with others. So we often saw a lot of that on hiring day, who was encouraging, who was supportive, who was letting others lead sometimes and not just trying to show us that they could lead. Somebody who could admit they were wrong, obviously with a strong set of morals. For me, perception was a bonus. So if somebody was a perceptive people or situation reader, that was always great for me. And I was always looking for a variety of personalities. I didn't want them all to be that sort of COA, center of attention camp person who would like to get up in front and, wear the funny costumes and do all the singing. Those people are really valuable at camp, but I didn't want a whole staff full of them. I needed the other ones too. So those are some of the things I was looking for.
Cool. How about you, Gab?
Well, we have, it depends on it really depends on returning staff versus, new staff members. But for our returning staff, sort of have 6 categories. So one is intent. So are they, do they believe in our camp values? Are they camper focused? The other one is team. So can we pair them with 80% of our staff members, no problem, without thinking about it? Are they able to work with a supervisor and take feedback? Self-care. So yes, I mean,
great one.
Of course, showering and this is important every once in a while. But it was more like, are they making sure that they're going to bed? We don't have a curfew, so are they making sure that they're going to bed? Are they not putting themselves in harm's way, or like that? Are they caring for themselves? And I think I really like that one. Skills. Are they able to teach an activity? Can they work with most of the population of our camp. So they don't have to be able to work with all of them, but sort of, a solid chunk would be very nice. And are they self-aware and able to improve? So they're aware. You don't have to have the, huge self-awareness, but enough to be able to hear somebody out and sort of build on that. And then sort of our last one is just, do they follow our communication program? So are they able to speak up when things aren't going well? Are they able to follow our DARE program, which is a similar program as Karen's program with the 4 S's? Is that correct, Beth?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So that they understand it and they work with it. And this is something that we use as a guideline basically for when we're looking if we should hire somebody back. And if they have a very strong X beside one of those 6, it's chances are we won't hire them back. They have to they can be struggling with some of them, but they can't have absolutely not, that doesn't work. So it's very clear for us and it's clear for them, why they wouldn't have a job. And, what helps with that is that you can have a staff member that's very skilled with campers, very skilled at an activity or running programs, but, they have no patience for new staff members or young staff members that are learning, and they intimidate others. And so we can't pair them with a lot of people. We won't hire that person back because they may be great there with our campers, but, it's causing a problem within the staff group. So those are the 6 that we're basically looking for returning staff members. And for new staff members, what we're looking for is a sense of adventure, able to meet new challenges and also a willingness to put themselves out there. And of course, an interest in working with young people and helping them grow as individuals. And we never, ever, ever try to sell our camp to new staff members. We don't talk about any of the perks. If anything, we try to scare them away. We say, there's a lot of bugs. This biggest town is half an hour away and literally has a gas station and a church and 1 restaurant. You're very little privacy. We really try to sell them on not coming to camp. And if they're still excited, if they, at the end of that first interview, and they're like, yeah, I actually really want to, sounds interesting, then we get into our second interview where we delve into deeper, questions and that kind of thing. But we never, ever try to say, oh, this is wonderful. You change children's lives and you'll make friends for life. No.
That's what you want them to say to you.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to be as clear as possible. And again, it's about expectations and all those things will happen if they understand sort of how much is expected of them and that, this is a job and it's difficult and it's hard. And I think it's one of the hardest jobs that people will do in their lifetime. You want them to sort of be, hardworking, I think is a really important part, that they're not, afraid to get their hands dirty. And we look at and see if people are hardworking and, we scare them. And they come. We love those guys. Super
That's right.
I started sending out a document because my first summer as director, I found that I was spending 10 minutes of my interview doing this is what a day is like, and this is what your responsibilities would be like, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, this is silly that I'm spending so much time doing this. I can send this ahead of time. Most of my staff are really into reading in general. So I put together just a PDF document, and I put in a paragraph there that says, you are serving in loco parentis. You will be expected during your summer here to clean up blood and feces and urine and vomit.
Yep.
And if this is going to be something you can't handle, you should not apply. And I really expected to get, questions about that and interviews and stuff. And not one person has been like, can you tell me more about this? Because I was totally ready with the response of, yeah, I'm the camp that tells you that these are things you're going to have to do. And the other camps, you're going to have to do it too, but they're just not being upfront about it. So I think it is really important for us to acknowledge what it is that they're giving up to be at camp, so that they can see as much of the rosy picture as possible. I think we've all interviewed folks who have an idea about what camp is, and they're not right at all about what camp is. So helping them see that's important.
And That document's we do a document as well, and it's very, very useful. We ask them to come prepared with 3 questions from that document in our first interview.
Nice.
So it gives them something where they actually had to think about it. And I encourage, like, the weirder the question, the better it is. So I think in those senses, you're right. You don't want to necessarily explain everything within. You want to save time getting to know the person, and having something that's really detailed. And they usually have more than 3 questions. But if you just ask, do you have any questions about what we read, or you read? Usually they're like, no, because they're trying to be polite and they're trying to be like, I understand everything.
Right.
So if you say, please come to this interview with 3 questions from that document, that would be great. And usually that starts with there's some very good conversation that stems from that. And then after that first interview, sometimes they realize camp is not for them. And that's where I'm very happy. I'm like, great, we dodged a bullet on that one. And I'm happy for them too, because that wouldn't have been a fun summer for them. They wouldn't have enjoyed themselves.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we remember as youth professionals that part of what we're doing when we're interviewing is teaching young people a skill.
Yes.
Because for many of them, this is their first job interview. And so we're giving them those guidelines and boundaries. And, by Gabrielle saying, bring 3 questions, we're giving them skills for when they go forward and do other job interviews. And I think we have to remember that too.
So true. I my first year I did that document, I had a crossword puzzle at the end that was basically like, look around our website, see if you can figure out the answers. So these little camp culture things. And then this year I just didn't put the effort into making that. So instead it's tips for your interview, and just some basic things like, put on a nice shirt, don't wear your pajamas, make sure you're aware of what's in your Skype background. Be on time, and if we don't call you within 10 minutes of when your interview is supposed to start, call us, and say, hey, what's going on? Because I've certainly had that happen too, where I've missed an interview for whatever reason, and they don't ever call, and then you're like, well, okay, well, what's going on with that, So yeah, I think that's really key to remember, that a lot of these folks are doing this for the first time, and we do have to kind of train them and take that into account too. But as far as things that I really look for, there's a few really key ones. For me, being a rule follower is a huge one. And if I can interview somebody and get the sense from them that I'm not going to have to worry about whether they're going to follow expectations and follow our policies and procedures, that's going to make my summer easier and make their summer easier too. So that's something that I like to seek out and try to find out. And when I get that sense, that's a good mark in their book. And then, as Beth and Gab both said about, buying in and you want to be at camp. Is camp going to be good for this person? Is this person going to be good for camp? It's making sure that it is true in both of those columns. And I've certainly taken some chances on folks that I'm like, man, camp is really going to boost this person's confidence and really going to help them grow. And it's a little scary and it's risky because, it may be that they don't totally buy in or they don't totally get it. But I feel really confident in the training that we provide and the expectations that we talk about to make it clear, like, this is what you're going to have to do to get the most out of this summer. So I think that's important. Being a good decision maker is huge, and that's I talk about during staff training. There's really two goals that I have during staff training. It's to build a community. And to teach my staff to make good decisions, because I cannot train you for the first day of camp. Like, you are going to have questions the first day of camp, but if you can make the good decision to go ask for help in this community that you feel that supports you, that's what we want to achieve. And so I'm looking for if they're going to come in with some of those already good decision-making skills, and are they going to fit into this community that I've built? Because it's totally true. Like you said, Beth, there may be somebody who's really great for this year, but next year they just don't fit into that community. And that can be a really hard conversation, but I think it's something you have to be really honest and true about. And it's something, especially when I get to my last few positions that I'm hiring, it's like, man, this person is really great, but I already have all the type A's that I need. I have got to get somebody who's a little more reserved and who's going to be able to relate to the introverts. And if I don't have that, I'm going to have a really terrible counselor dynamic happening. So I'm thinking already about who's going to pair with who and how that's going to look. And are they trainable? I think that that's the big thing, is this a person who wants to learn? And I'm really fortunate because our camp has a big focus on learning. Like that is a key element to camp. It's a culture that values learning very much so. So I would say in general, our staff come in with that. But if you don't have any interest in learning, this is not the place for you. And so I think that's a key thing to look for. Other thoughts on that, about qualities you're looking for?
I think we covered them.
I like that you did a word search.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Do it.
I liked
great.
it.
And I actually got some questions about that. And people would be like, can you tell me what the juice is that's maybe made from bugs? I was like, that's bug juice. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. That's the Kool-Aid, right? So yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Well, so cool. I think we should dive into now. What are those best interview questions, or maybe just even best practices that you found when conducting interviews? Gab, let's start with you.
I would say every summer set your bar high, and if there's a type of culture at your camp that you feel a little bit hopeless and helpless about, that in your interview process, this is the time to change it. So, and don't accept anybody that's not on board with that sort of shift. And I'm not talking about a reactional shift like that last summer, but it never really happened any other time. You can address those issues, but I think it's you're coming in with their personal growth and camp's growth. And I've met many camp directors that are just like, well, this is the way it is. And I have to say that's a very quick way of burning yourself out when you start thinking this is the way it is, I can't change anything. It actually you can, and it starts with your interview process. So really look at your summer, evaluate your summer, and see what kind of shifts that you want to change. 9 times out of 10, it really has to do with your staff. And you want to look at where you want your summer to go, and you want to invite people to join that vision. So for me, it's really looking at hiring the right people and making sure that they're buying into what's the goal of, next year, next summer. And I also love one of my favorite interview questions. I'm just looking right here. One of my staff members came up with this. Claudia came up with this question. I loved it. Her question was, what type of camper or child are you drawn to that other people sometimes have a difficulty with? So, for example, maybe somebody that's a little bit hyperactive, or maybe somebody that's a little angsty. And so I asked that question, and they tell us, somebody that's really hyperactive, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, what would be your tip to somebody that doesn't know how to deal with somebody that's hyperactive? And they give usually the staff members have extreme insight on, well, the important thing with somebody that is X or Y or Z is this, and this is how you need to approach them, and this is why sometimes they have difficulty. It's such a great question because it allows your staff members, even new staff members, to shine, because hopefully they've worked with children before. But it also really, really shows if they actually have very little idea about children themselves. So for returning staff members, this shows me like, oh, they really know what they're talking about, and I'm actually going to use you in a session because that's really great information. And a new staff member, it shows me whether they know children at all. And I've always enjoyed this question. It's one of my favorites.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Beth?
For me, it was always important to create questions or challenges in a hiring day or an interview that spoke to the values that we thought were really important. So I really encourage people to do that. Whatever your camp's values are, figure out how to get those kinds of answers out. So whether you're looking for people who like thinking outside the box, or who are really creative, or who are willing to take risks, or who really support people around them, or who are builders of community, or who have great resiliency, put those things into your interview or your hiring day that will give you those kinds of answers. So I was going over a bunch of 15 years worth when I was preparing for the podcast, just kind of looking back over some of the questions, and questions like, tell us a time when you put the needs of others ahead of your own. Or has there been a time when you stood up for something that you believed in that might have been an unpopular position, and how did that feel and what did you do about it? Or, tell us about a time that in your community or at school you put, it was a job where it took a lot more effort than you thought, and, kind of give that, those kinds of questions which tell a lot about them as a person. And then Ruby already touched on this, but these are some other questions that we ask that tell you about how they interact with children. But, teach me something in the next 5 minutes. And it could be anything from like how to make a paper crane, or how to, speak in another language, a couple of phrases, or, how to tie a tie, whatever it happens to be. But it also gives you an insight into how they think on their feet, how creative they are, and how they communicate, which I think is always a really important fact. For me, hiring day gave me a chance to front load everything about the summer, and Gab and Ruby have talked about this too, but how things will work, what my expectations were of paperwork, pay schedules, days off, all that kind of stuff. So again, allowed them to choose whether or not they were going to accept a job they were offered. It allowed me to front load with parents, because we did LIT hiring days as well, not hiring days, but LIT days, because LITs were not just accepted simply because they were 16 years old, but they had to apply as well. And you could invite all the parents to come in half an hour before the end of the day and go over sort of the differences between your child used to be a camper and now they're an LIT, and what does that mean, and all the changes that you would like them to know, and how you can talk to the staff about how they will treat each other through that day, and that's how they will treat each other through the summer. So a lot of front loading can happen that day. The way that the day worked, just to kind of give people a bit of an idea, was that we would start with those expectations, how the day would run, give them all those Maslow needs, like here's where the washrooms are, this is when lunch will be, like all that kind of stuff to get your gold staff members to calm down a little bit because they know it's going to happen. And then let them know that they're going to be watched, that we're going to be walking around with clipboards. And usually within about the first half hour, people forget that you're looking, they forget that you're watching. But we would always start off with something really creative and something that they had to do on their own. So we set them on edge just a little bit, so that they knew that this was real. This wasn't just a day of playing games with camp people. We put out index cards and markers one year and said, you have one index card and all these markers, tell us what you'd like us to know about you. Yeah. You have 10 minutes. Go. And then we would move into, get to know you games, all those kinds of things. A lot of research went into those because if we had returning staff, we wanted to do new games. But you're watching who participates, who includes others, how well people follow instructions, as Ruby said. And usually by the end of that first hour, they're just fully participating and forgetting that they're there for an interview. One of the things we asked them to do was to make their own business cards. What info would you put on it? What's your job title? What's your logo? What's your slogan? And Gab would have totally ruled at that. I
would have really liked that.
I know, you would have been great at it.
Except I might have spent too much time. There would have been like, she's struggling with time management.
But she's very creative and talented. We would always give them an opportunity to share personal things at some point. Like one year we asked them to tell us how they got their name, where their name came from. One of my favorite things over the years, and I would bring it back every, 3 or 4 years because other staff hadn't seen it before if they were new, but it was called Hammer or Nail, and I would get them to line up, it was sort of grouped together in the center of the room, and I would say, if you agree with this word or resonate with this word, go to the left side of the room. If you resonate with this word, go to the right side of the room. So, for example, hammer, all the people who would say hammer over nail would go to one side of the room. All the people who would say nail would go to the other. And then we would ask for volunteers to tell us why they chose that word. And it was fascinating, the answers they would come up with. Like, you really had people thinking differently. It was very interesting. Things like, Picasso or Da Vinci, sun or moon, cube or ball, jeans or a suit, like any of those kinds of things. And they really, some people never answered at all, and that was okay, but we got a lot of really interesting things would come out of it. And then we would move into initiatives throughout the rest of the day as things progressed, and we were getting harder and harder initiatives as the day went on. So you're looking for creativity, problem solving, those who gave somebody else an opportunity to lead or to shine, those who were really good sports, all that kind of stuff. And we would always end with them having to create something really big together. So they would have a project that they would have to do, and there could be 30, 40, 50 people in the group at that point. If we're just all the counselors, applicants, so it could be more than that. And they had to do something together as a group. So that was always interesting to see how that progressed. One year we had them help us remarket summer camp. And we actually used some of their ideas throughout the rest of the year because some of them were so good. So, what new programs would they add? How would they welcome parents? What new items would they add to the tuck shop? What new traditions did they want to add? All those kinds of things. So it was really interesting. And then we would finish, after all the interviews took place in the afternoon as well, and with our expectations of how the process would go going forward. So when they would hear, if we needed to call them for further discussion about particular positions, and laying that groundwork of respect for summer camp, so letting them know that we hoped our decisions would be respected inside and outside of camp, and how hard the interview process was, those kinds of things. It really helped us to really start building community and getting people on board before months and months before summer started. So that was kind of my process.
That's awesome. Very cool. I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I like that a lot. What you did, Beth, is directly applicable to camp, and even might be used at camp. And I think that's. Sometimes our staff members are used to writing papers, and then the only person that reads the papers is the professor, and a lot of the work that's asked of them is not necessarily used. And so when you can use part of that interview process in your camp development and showcase and say, what you said or what we did, we're going to implement part of it, it shows that we value them and their ideas, and that this is a community that's built together and not just by one person that's making decisions. So I really like that marketing piece that you guys did, and that's
it was awesome fun. That they were amazing, and as I recall, that was a great senior staff that year.
I'm sure they felt some ownership at that point too.
Absolutely, so absolutely, cool. And we're really excited when they came to the tuck shop and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's my thing!" It's like, "Yep, there it is." So It was fun.
Yeah, it's a very cool. We did a similar thing where we had like a pizza programming party, and we had a bunch of staff, but it was definitely partially staff training, staff interviewing, and we even had some new staff members come and join. And like I said, not everybody can come to these things because people live in many different areas, but
you have international staff, so that makes things a little difficult.
Exactly. And we actually hosted a pizza party in Mexico, which was really fun. And I did Skype with them, but the fact that we didn't implement everything that we discussed, but we implemented some of it. It was really, really nice I think everybody felt like they contributed to something. So it's cool.
So cool. I think one of the things I want to make sure I highlight is all three of us required return staff to go through the interview process again. And I certainly do still encounter many folks who don't have return staff interviews or asking, like, well, what do you do about that return staff member who isn't really cooperating? Like, you don't hire them. So if you're not having them go through the process, I think there should be something, even if it's as little as a 10-minute conversation of why do you want to be back at camp? Because I think even that little bit is better than just, hey, who wants to come back this summer? Okay, get an email back. Cool, you are assigned, and you've got a job. So I think that's a really smart thing to do, and it can be a very extensive process. It can be different from the new staff, or it can be the same. But I tell my staff at the end of the summer, we try to have a 50-50 split of return and new. So there's only so many return spots, and if you want one, you got to apply for it. And you may be told you need to take a year off. That may happen, but that's what's best for camp and best for you. So I think making that clear is important, talking about that process. So I just quickly brainstormed some of my favorite questions, and I kind of have two categories of just fun but insightful, and then the more traditional camp or traditional interview questions. One that I found that works really well when you have a staff member who's really nervous in their interview. If I see, I can really sense that they're just tense and scared. I will ask them, tell me about your passions. What are some things that you really care about or are really interested in? And a lot of times, you can visibly see them kind of go, oh, well, I love being outside. And just when they start getting into that world of these are the things that I love, and it's easy for them to talk about those things. So I use that a lot of times as a tool when I see somebody who just is clearly really nervous in their interview. Some fun questions that I asked my return staff this year, what do you think about when you're alone in the car? And it's been such a fun question to hear the answers to. And, it's everything from I listen to music in the car and I'm just yelling out loud the whole time. And that's totally me. So I can relate to that. Or, I'm thinking about just life's problems and issues and things that I'm sorting out. It's a cool way to see how do they reflect, how do they spend that time alone. It can give you a hint on are they an introvert or an extrovert, what is that time needed for. With my new staff this year, I've been asking, it's a question I took right off of a 50 best interview questions or outrageous interview questions or whatever. And it's essentially that you're shrunk to the height of a nickel and you're, still your body, but you're thrown into a glass blender and the blades are going to start moving in 60 seconds. What are you going to do? And so it's the classic, what are people going to do thinking on their feet, right? And one of the answers that just totally blew me away is one of the folks, and I've hired this girl for this summer. She said, if there's just really no way I'm going to get out, I'm just going to just start yelling to all the people that I love and just hope it makes its way through the universe, that they hear that one last thing before the blades get turned on. And I was just like, wow, that was a really insightful and creative response, and just kind of shows where her heart is, I think. So it's been a fun one, and I've also had people that just have been like, I don't know, and you got to be able to think on your feet at camp. So it doesn't necessarily automatically take them out, but it shows a lot. I
was like, Duck, you're not that tall.
Lie flat.
Lie down. Duck, wait till it's over.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of that too.
Get back there. Go.
But there's also the how many people are I'm going to do everything I can to get out, and the other people that are saying I'm just going to be patient and wait at the bottom of the blender. So I think it really is more insightful than I really thought it was going to be. It's been fun. One of our other directors asks about if you were going to throw a theme party, what kind of theme would it be, and what would you dress up as? So that's been a fun one. Awesome. Yeah, it's a good one. And then for some more serious questions, I like to ask return staff and sometimes new staff as well, how does camp fit into the big picture? What role does your role at camp this year play in your life outside of camp? I like to ask, especially cabin counselors, but at my naturalists as well, what do you think are the keys to creating community? Because it's come to my attention that a lot of young people really don't have any idea how to help people forge friendships. And so helping them see, when they come with that, that's awesome, but also helping them see, these are the very specific steps you can take to create community. A great question that I ask almost always is share a time that you had a difference of opinion with an employer or an authority figure, or maybe even just somebody who was older than you were, and what you did in that situation. And that one's really insightful because you sometimes have the kids that say, oh, I never have disagreements with anybody. And you're like, liar. It's not true. And that's a hard one. And I always tell them, you can think about this, but, please answer. My return staff, I always ask them, what can the administration do to support you in having a successful summer? Some of that is you get some touchy-feely, they're like, you guys were so great, and just keep doing what you were doing. But, you also get the, we needed more communication, or we needed these issues, and it helps identify where you as the director can be a better supervisor and boss. And The last thing that I wanted to share was actually a tip that came from Chris Thurber at Directors Camp this year. One of my friends went, and talking about group interviews and just processes. You could do this during staff training, or I don't think I would do it during a group interview. But there's a series of events that are all different things that you have this group of staff or applicants do. But one of the last things you have them do is they stand in a circle, and there's one person in the middle. And the people in the circle can ask that person in the middle anything they want to, anything at all. And the person in the middle can only respond with the word sausage. And so, you're having to tell your story, but you can only say the word sausage. And you can see, how people deal with that. Like, are they uncomfortable? Or do people make it inappropriate right away? And just said, like, there's so much you can learn in that 2 minutes of watching people do this. So I thought that was a really kind of ridiculous, but also, it's very true. Like, there's lots of things in camp that we can only say so much, and we got to keep it appropriate. And how are you going to set people up for success? Are you trying to set people up for failure? Because it's funny, I think that's a really creative idea. So, any other best practices, interview questions, things that you guys want to throw out?
I think Ruby, if you're going back to interviewing returning staff members and you don't have that much time, I think the two questions that I tend to focus on, and one of them you mentioned is, what do you think camp can do better at? Mm-hmm. And that's sort of a little bit of the supervisor administrative, and they don't have to come with it on how to make it better, but just, I think we can do this better, but I don't know how. And just build your interview question around problem solving that issue. And that way, those returning staff members are, thinking that they're learning that they're part of the solution. And then the other part is, how are you different from, we'll say Ruby now compared to Ruby in June? Cool. And where do you want to be next year at the end of the summer? And those are the two questions that I sort of tend to focus on. If you don't have time to do a lot of interviews with your returning staff members, those are the two that I would sort of go with, because they're contributing to camp and you're helping them grow as an individual. Cool.
Awesome. Well, I think we're there. I think it's the time of the show when Gab provides us with a recap. We've covered a lot today. So tell us what you learned today, Gab.
I feel like we should have theme music for this part of the show.
I'm going to work on that. Season 3.
I had to rewrite some of this. I was like, this is insane. Okay, I've categorized it into 3 categories. What we're looking for, tools, and questions. All right, what we're looking for, people that make good decisions. Are they trainable? Are they inclusive? Are they team players? Are they camp-centered focus? Are they awesome in general? Tools. Returning staff, let's interview them. It's really important. Help us remarket our summer expectations. That's a tool. Tell what you expect from staff members. Creative application, use Doodle, online scheduling, handwritten letters. I'm going to start doing that this summer.
That's a great one.
Hammer or nail, if you don't know what that is, check out the podcast. Multiple interviews. Teach us something. I love that. Teach us something. You can do that over Skype. Email afterwards. Recap what you talked about. Group interviewing can be really cool. Make sure you have clipboards and intimidate people. Be transparent with new staff members. That was a joke. I apologize. Be transparent with new staff members, making sure that it's not all roses and ponies at your camp. All right, interviewing questions. Actually, best thing is to go back to what Ruby just said, because she listed a whole bunch of great interview questions, but here are a couple of them that we'll just add in just in case. Tell me about a time ... is a really great question, because it actually stems from their own experiences. And then come up with some crazy question like, what do you think about when you're alone in your car? That could just lead to so many fun conversations. And that is basically what we talked about today on this podcast.
Great. Thanks,
well
Gab.
done.
No problem.
So good at that. So we want to share with you all how to get involved with our podcast. You can join us on the hashtag Camp Code. And please tell us what topics you would like for us to discuss, any guests that you'd recommend that we talk to, any great leadership training tips that you have to share with us. We'd love to hear from you because we are all about sharing in this industry. Also, if you found this podcast to be useful, we would love for you to leave a rating and review for us on iTunes. And we've actually made it easy for you. You can go do that by going to camphacker.tv/cc_iTunes. Or you can also tweet your love about the show with a pre-made, you don't even have to write it, tweet. If you go to camphacker.tv/campcodelove, that's all one word, campcodelove. And it'll make it real easy. You can pop that right into your Twitter account. We also want to send out a big thank you to Iscus and Aqua 3017, who have written reviews for us and on iTunes, and we really appreciate hearing from you. Your feedback helps keep this show going, so please make sure that you head on over to iTunes and leave us a review there. We really appreciate that. We'll post those links also in our show notes, so it'll be easy to click over from there. So next up, I want to go around and make sure you know how you can get in touch with us. So Beth, tell us a little bit about how to find you.
You can find me most easily with Camp Hacker. So my email is beth@camphacker.tv. You can go to camphacker.tv to our website or use the hashtag Camp Hacker. But now you can also find us at gocamp.pro, which is a new venture that we're going to be getting ready for the new year. So lots of support and information for camping pros.
Cool. Gab?
You can check out where I work at waro.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Gabrielle Rail.
Awesome. And I'm also on Twitter. I'm RubyLynn85. You can also email me. It's just ruby@greenriverpreserve.org. And for our next podcast, we are so excited to be interviewing Luke Durham of Camp Laney for an episode all about leadership training at a boys' camp. We recently recorded a podcast about training at a girls' camp, and so we wanted to call in an expert about boys' camp since none of us had specific experience there on a long-term basis. Summer camp has been a big part of Luke's entire life, and he's really been lucky enough to graduate from being a camper to a camp staff member to a director of Camp Laney, which is a boys' camp in Mentone, Alabama. Interestingly enough, that is the same town where I worked in outdoor education for 4.5 years. So it was really fun to get to talk to Luke and hear about our favorite restaurants, which there's only one or two, and hear a little bit about a camp that I've heard so much about from the outside, and hear a little more about what's going on the inside. Luke's going to be sharing some of his greatest ideas and stories for how to create a welcoming and open environment at boys' camp, while also teaching young men to be their best selves. So our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training, and we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments or most effective tips. You can tell us what they are using that hashtag CampCode. Today, Beth has our best practice.
It's fun when I hear the shows and am a part of it, and everything that comes out of my co-hosts' mouths are things that I would say too. For the most part, obviously they each have their own creative ideas, but our philosophies are so similar that I was going to give some advice for our best practice, and I think you've already heard most of it from them as the show went on. But for me, with 15 years of doing that, the one thing I learned was that your hiring process has to be what's best for camp. It's really hard. It's a hard job, but you are the one that has the big picture. And so you have to put the effort in to make sure that the hiring process is done exactly, which is whatever camp needs. So that might mean interviewing, re-interviewing all those people who've worked for you for 5, 6, 7, 8 summers already. But that is what's best for camp. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. These are the most important decisions you will make all year. So trust your gut. If something feels off, it likely is. So take the time to address it. Take an opportunity to discuss any concerns that you have, things that you heard about last summer that as camp directors, we all start to hear about things September, October, November. Things that didn't follow your camp's philosophy. Take that opportunity to address those issues now. When I was hiring, I would always call to offer a job and say, but here's my concern for this year, and this can't happen at camp again. Just putting it out there. Hiring is not about being their friend. That's the really important part, is making sure that they know you have to do what's best for camp. And my second piece of advice is to make them work for it. Even the ones who have been on staff for years, they need to show you how important that job is this year, and if their heads and hearts are still in it. If they're the right fit, they're going to completely understand why you ask them to go through it every year, and never ever apologize for high expectations. So those would be my words of advice.
Nice.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for listening, and please join us on the hashtag Camp Code.